Hey everyone, welcome back to the Breakpoint Show. We're here. It is so Martin, his OCD can be relieved. It is April 22nd. Yes, Martin. We get I make sure for you I get the date in for all the episodes. But yeah, it's spring, nice and sunny here. I hope it's sunny where you are in Belgium and Pennsylvania, and our guest is in Prague, which is one of my favorite cities in the whole world. Love Prague. But without further ado, we'll welcome on Tomas Herceg, and welcome, Tomas, to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we are going to talk to, Tomas, I'll give a little description of Tomas. Tomas lives in Prague. He runs Update Conference, so in Prague. And next month, you're going to be where?
In Krakow, in Poland.
Krakow, in Poland.
That's our first event in Poland.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to it.
And it's about a 2-hour, 3-hour drive from Prague?
6.
Krakow? Oh, 6.
Our highways are not very finished, and a lot of traffic, so it's 6.
Okay, gotcha.
And Chris, just for reference, Europe is small, but not that small.
Okay. Well, I mean, when I drive down to Florida and it takes me like 20 hours to get from my house to like where we go in Florida, that's like you could go from like Sweden all the way down to Sicily in that distance. So I never know. So I did look on the map between Prague and Krakow, and I thought maybe it was only like 3 hours distance, but yeah, you're right. With roads, you have to go around mountains and landscape and stuff like that. So, but cool. We are going to talk about the book that Tomas wrote, and we'll have a link to that in the show notes. He wrote a book on migrating .NET framework to .NET. I always say .NET Core, but .NET Modern. Now that we've dropped the core, but yeah, Tomas, can you just give a brief description of the book?
Yeah, I was fighting with the naming, as it's quite usual in Microsoft technologies. Like I ended with like saying the old .NET and the new .NET, because I think that's the best way to think about that. So the book is about modernization of web applications. So I'm not talking about WinForms and WPF, because that's another story. So everything that concerns web applications running on .NET Framework, and what are the steps, how to plan the process, and what you need to think about, what you need to do to get running on .NET 8. It was at the time of writing the book, but everybody who is working with the new .NET is probably have the experience that upgrading from .NET 6 to 7 and 7 to 8, it's the easy part. The biggest step is from .NET Framework to .NET New, any version of .NET New, and then it's much easier.
Yeah. It's not just .NET. It's all the other things also that kind of come along and were rewritten for .NET.
So I have a question for Tomas. A lot of people write books because they see a need in the market or they have a personal experience. Like, why did you personally decide to tackle this decidedly very, very difficult subject, right? Like, what was it that made you say, you know what, I'm going to try to take a crack at trying to help teams migrate from full framework, old framework to new .NET?
Yeah, so basically, we did this migrations in my company quite a lot. So not me personally, but my colleagues from teams I'm running, they have been working with customers using ASP.NET Web Forms or MVC apps with a lot of other dependencies on old libraries. Like we had something with link to SQL, with entity framework for the old version with the object context API. I'm not sure if everybody remembers that.
Yeah,
And
no.
like the goal was to migrate that to the new .NET, and we get quite a lot of experience doing that. Interestingly enough, a lot of our customers, every customer had different motivations to do that. Some had problems with finding new team members who would know these old frameworks. The other company, they wanted to get rid of Windows Server, so they wanted everything to run on Linux. So like the motivation can be very different, and that's why and then I got email from a publisher, and they had good salespeople, so they like convinced me that I want to write the book. So I did.
Yeah, yeah.
Very cool.
I always say, you know what? Like 20, 25 years ago, you could make a living on writing books. I don't think you can do that anymore. So you write a book because you just love the subject and you want to share that information. But so I do have a question. What do you think was the biggest motivation for your clients to move from framework to the new .NET?
I think there would be like two categories. One category is that the development team is like, I would say, like active enough that they always want to use the latest versions. They like to try new things. They like innovation, and they push for this modernization, and they somehow convince the management, okay, yeah, let's do it. Let's do that because it's important. And of course, there are a lot of valid reasons to do that. Security in the first place, but like a lot of other benefits. So that's one part. And the other part is when the company is forced to do that because of either it's like internal motivations or from customers, like their clients complain, okay, this application is really old, it doesn't look nice, it looks like from 2000, and things like that. And then the end result can be the same, like the way how you do the migration can be the same, but the how it starts is very different. And of course, like you need to target to different objectives in this process.
Okay.
And one of the chapters of the book is how to plan this from the technical perspective. So like what you will gain, what is the risk if you do the migration, what is the risk if you don't do it, because every option has its own benefits and risks. And then there is a section about how to, if you see the technical need to do the modernization, how to convince the business people why it's necessary, how to speak to them so they would understand the problem. Because if you talk about like performance improvements in .NET 8, probably it will not be as effective.
No.
So I'm actually kind of interested in those reasons, because I see many, or at least I hear from many organizations where they say, okay, look, we're not going to migrate because it only modernizes the code base, but the end result, the application that we get, is more or less the same. So there's no real business benefit or functional benefits to do this migration. So what's the typical approach there to convince management and the business to do the upgrades?
I would start with security, because if you look at, and we don't need to dig into the details, but like if you look how .NET Framework was designed, it's monolithic. It's difficult to install new versions without the risk of breaking something. So it's more difficult to stay with the latest versions to get the security fixes quickly. and also the practices of developers, how we handle secrets and these things, they have changed a lot. In .NET Framework projects, a lot of teams, they just put the secret in web.release.config file, put it in Git, and the secret was there. And if you wanted to do it correctly, it's almost impossible. It requires a lot of effort to not have the secrets in your code and make sure it will work. In the new .NET, we have user secrets, we have key vault, we have a lot of other ways how to do it properly, and it's actually easier to do it properly, securely, than to do it insecurely. So this is very difficult, very important for me. Just like the security perspective, there is forms authentication. Again, like it works somehow, but by today's standards, it's not recommended. So companies should get rid of that as quick as possible. The second thing is, I think, let's call it attractiveness for new developers, because the new .NET was released sometimes like 2016. So it's 9 years ago. Anyone who has been learning .NET in last 5 years probably never saw .NET Framework. They already started with the new .NET, and this will get, I would say, worse, but it's actually a good thing. But like from the hiring perspective, it will be increasingly difficult to find people with the skills of using 10 years old versions of .NET Framework and related libraries. So like it's increasingly difficult to find new people, and of course, like people can leave to other teams, to other companies where they use the newest version. So there is also a risk of losing people with the knowledge of the project. And the third is like developer satisfaction, because the new .NET comes with a bunch of tooling, better developer tools, better performance in terms of the developer inner loop. Yeah, you change a code 100 times a day, and then you need to compile it and run it. And with things like hot reload or like improved compilation times, this gets a huge like speed up in the process. Recently we migrated one big .NET Framework project like 1,000 web pages to the new .NET, and the compile time dropped from like 4 minutes to like 20 seconds. That's a huge improvement. If you imagine that you need to do that like 100 times a day, how much time you can save by that.
Yeah, Tomas, you kind of hinted at something that I always find fascinating, right? There's like the technical part of the migration, but you keep mentioning developers and teams and stakeholders. Like, how important is it that if you're facing this kind of migration, that you have people that understand the old framework before you try to tackle kind of like an upgrade? Is it critical, or is it something like if you hired a consulting team that only ever did new framework or new .NET stuff, is that feasible, or do you need a mix of developers to kind of help you successfully migrate things?
I would say that it's not absolutely necessary. You will just be slower if you don't have people with these skills. Because they will figure it out. It's not rocket science. We have AI, we have a lot of materials on that. So they would probably figure it out, just like it will take more time. They will spend more hours on that. And to be honest, like 90% of the time, it's quite mundane work. You are either copy pasting code and doing like trivial edits, changing namespaces, changing APIs, writing clever regexes to make like mass replacements and things like that, or you let AI do it, and then you need to test everything that it didn't break and these things. So like you can do it without deep skills in the old .NET framework. On the other hand, if you need to do, especially at the beginning phase, the planning and putting this process together, the knowledge of the old world can be very important, because the first thing you will probably start with is authentication, configuration, and these fundamental parts of the application. And it's useful if you know the old world, if you know from what you are migrating, and if you make a change, you can see the impact, what it could possibly break in the old code base. So I think that this is a huge bonus. If you have people with these skills, it's a great thing. But if you don't have them, still try to do the migration. Just be prepared that it might be a little bit more difficult.
Yeah. Well, I thought we could go through an episode without mentioning AI, but I was wrong. But hey, I didn't say it in the beginning, but if you like this episode, which I don't know why you wouldn't, go down and subscribe to our YouTube channel and like us and hit the notification bell so you know when our episodes come out. We're not quite on a regular basis, but we try. So that way you can be notified when new episodes come out. So Tomas, you hit on something when you said AI. And one of my questions was going to be, what are there third-party tooling or third-party resources that can help with the migration? And I say that because I have tried to do a migration with AWS. They have a migration tool that you can use to move stuff from framework to the new .NET that will work inside AWS on Linux. So I'm curious, in your book, do you talk about like third-party tools or migration tools or resources?
I'm not familiar with this AWS tool. I know they have some, but I never tried it. In the book, I was mentioning .NET Upgrade Assistant, which is part of Visual Studio. It can help you to set up the projects and do some, like, I would say, the trivial, the easy, low-hanging fruit parts. Yeah, so like changing some NuGet packages to their modern equivalents, changing some namespaces, and preparing to start. If I talk about the practical example, imagine you have a .NET Framework web app. It will help you to set up YARP, which is a reverse proxy, and basically it can forward requests from the one web application to another. So basically, if you use this Upgrade Assistant on a ASP.NET Framework web app, it will set up a new empty ASP.NET Core project on a side and set up a YARP. So any request gets to the old version, unless you say, okay, no, I can handle this URL in the new project. So this is like a pattern which you can use. You can incrementally take parts from the old application and migrate them to the new one. So that's how .NET Upgrade Assistant can help with setting up the project. And I haven't seen at the day of the recording, there is a .NET Conf focus on modernization conference, and they are probably showing some use of AI. So I haven't seen the sessions yet, but I assume that there will be some showcases of how you can use AI, because there is a lot of use cases where AI can help, not only with like transforming the code from the old version to the new one, but also I have seen using AI in legacy modernizations, for example, to extract or explain business logic in the old code, or generate missing documentation and things like that, or generating test cases, because the old code can be written in a way that you don't necessarily want to copy it one by one to the new project. You want to re-implement it using some other method, maybe make it a bit cleaner, but you need it to behave the same. So like extracting tests or business logic from the legacy code base, that can be an interesting usage of AI.
Okay, that's good. And we'll put a link into that .NET Conf, because I think it's coming up in a couple weeks. But I'll put a link to that so people can look forward to it, or look at recordings from that event from Microsoft.
Tomas, it's interesting you're mentioning AI and stuff, because to me, I think like the web forms and old .NET framework era was very like closed off, like very enterprisey. So I'm kind of surprised that there was enough training data around, say, web forms and some of the older ASP.NET Core stuff, so that AI models could actually be trained and understand that kind of coding. But maybe the coding in old .NET framework was maybe rudimentary enough that any training model can kind of understand that code, but maybe not fully understand it. Have you found in your practice with using AI, like, is there something it's good at looking at old code, and is there something it's just not capable of doing with old code?
I think that you have a great point that there is not enough data, especially if you look at GitHub, how many .NET Framework web applications you will find that the number is not that impressive, because most of that was closed source. So I am a bit skeptical about any third party or anyone who would say I have a magic AI tool which will do modernization for me, because like it's not unless you are ready to introduce a lot of new bugs in your application. That's probably what you don't want to use. It can be a great tool to help you to get rid of the repetitive, mundane work, but still you will need to go through the application and test that everything works, because like this process can be very fragile. And the other point, the large language models, they work with statistics. So even if there would not be that much training data, provided that the API looks like predictable and it's like you can use intuition to navigate through the API. And I think .NET Framework is a great example how this can work, because I'm just based on what IntelliSense gives me, I'm usually able to figure out how to use the API. So like the predictability is there. So I think that even with not that many examples, the AI can grasp the important thing. Maybe they trained it also on my book, so probably it will have 700 pages of text on how to do this migration.
Well, and they probably took all those old .NET Framework books, even though they didn't have the IP, they probably took all those old books as training content anyway. So I'm sure there's probably more knowledge about .NET Framework than we probably think.
And still, I wonder if it understands the web forms page lifecycle. That's going to be the big question.
Yeah, that's goofy. I think that will make any LLM insane. So
exactly. No, this was actually a thought that came up while you were explaining the training data and so on. Like web forms, I don't think there's any real alternative other than rewriting part of your application if you're on web forms in a full .NET framework or old .NET framework. How do you typically handle that? Like, do you recommend people write integration tests first, or do web testing first, or just have a team of people who know the application who can click around and make it happen? Or validate that the migration was successful?
Yeah, it varies. In some apps, we had a chance to write tests because there was enough budget to do it. Like there was a huge impact on not to introduce breaking changes. So that means that they were aware of that, and they allowed us to spend more time on writing automated tests and making sure that everything works. And it's a great benefit because the original application, it didn't have practically any tests. And these tests are not used only for the modernization, but since that moment you have the tests, so you can expect much less issues, not returning bugs and things like that. So like the benefit is not only for the purpose of modernization, but it's a long-term benefit. So they agreed with that. That was great because the team was feeling much safer, and they were not scared of doing bigger changes, like touching something fundamental, some parts of infrastructure. They were happy to do it because they get the confidence that you can safely do it, and if you didn't break 1,000 tests, probably it's fine. So that was a great benefit. On the other hand, we had projects where the budget was very restricted, and it was basically perceived as a better option to do the testing manually. So basically they were running both applications, the new and old one, side by side, and doing the same things in both apps and manually verifying that it works. It also depends on a complexity of the web app, because if it's some simple CRUD application, probably writing tests, it's not that much value than if it's some like very difficult banking system where you want all the numbers to be really correct.
Yeah. Hey, I have a question. With stakeholders, money's always a big thing. And you mentioned in the beginning that one reason why you could migrate is to get onto the cloud with Linux resources. Can you share maybe if you have this, the difference between running .NET Framework on Windows instances or Windows machines and how much cheaper Linux is? I'm just curious if you have looked at anything around that.
Depends on the size of deployments. I migrated also several personal websites that were written very long time ago, so they were using .NET Framework, and I was very happy that in Azure the VM with Linux was about like 40% cheaper because of the license costs that is included in the Windows instance price, but not in the Linux instances. So even for a trivial application with like 6 pages, that can be a huge saving, 40%. Because like if it's your personal website, you probably don't want to spend much money for that on that. There are a lot of case studies from big users of .NET Framework. One of them is Bing team. They published several quite detailed reports on how they migrated from .NET Framework to .NET Core 3.1 and then to .NET Core 6, and their savings on the operation costs were like, I don't remember the numbers correctly, but it was like something around like 30-40%. So also that's wide significant saving if you consider how many servers they probably need for this purpose. So that's I think that can be quite interesting. On the other hand, most of the projects we were modernizing, they didn't require that many servers. They were mostly, there were business applications used by like hundreds of employees of some company. So there you cannot expect like having 50 servers and getting to 30, because like there was one server or two servers in a farm, and you will need to keep that number. So you can still save something on licensing, but it's probably not the most interesting benefit in such a case.
Okay. I know Khalid's killing to ask a question. So.
No, I mean, we've been talking a lot about .NET, like the old framework to new framework, but specifically for like web applications, right? With the old framework, there maybe wasn't a lot of options in terms of like technologies and architecture patterns, especially if you're dealing with some of the first .NET Framework applications. Those are likely started in web forms. and probably built using web form controls and all those kind of things. But when companies and teams come to you to begin a conversation about upgrades, what do you think the most common recommended upgrade path is into the new version of .NET? Like, there's a lot of options out there, right? There's MVC, Razor Pages, Blazor now. You could go web APIs with SPA front ends. What do you see most teams gravitate towards when they start to think about rewrites?
It really depends. I cannot see a common pattern that would fit the most, but I would say there are like two huge categories. One category is that you just need to do the modernization, but otherwise you are happy with the application as it is. So you want to keep the UI to look the same, do not make any big structural changes in the application. So that's one, almost like one-to-one modernization, that the end result is hardly visible for the users, although the changes can be quite big internally. So in that case, if the application was written in MVC, it's probably the easiest way to use MVC core. If it was ASP.NET web pages, there are Razor Pages that are conceptually very similar. And if it's web forms, there are like a couple of options because there is no equivalent for web forms. So in my book, I mention migration to Blazor, and also migration to .vvm, which is a framework I happen to be an author of. There are like fundamental differences in these upgrade paths, but like that's another option. Or the other category is that the modernization is done because the old user interface doesn't match today's standards, so you need to basically completely replace the front end or make bigger changes in the application, maybe move something to a mobile app, or like split the application to several other parts, or maybe bring some like ready-made software as a service solution and integrate the rest of the application with that. We had several systems, they implemented their own CRM modules, and they were just replaced by some existing CRM product, and we implemented some API integration. So modernization can be also like deleting a lot of code and connecting the rest of the application to some external third-party ready-made solution. So that's also an option. And in these two categories, you have very different approaches that you want to take. And also it depends on some like non-technical things, because if the business needs to adapt the changes quickly, you will probably be more focused on some incremental modernization path. So you will be able to deliver small bits quite quickly. If it's more stable environment, you can like use bigger chunks and like do a release every half a year with some significant part of being migrated. So that really differs.
So it's interesting that you touch on dependencies and all of those things, which is, I think, also a big one when converting from .NET Framework to new .NETs. In all of the migration projects that you have been a part of, have you ever encountered the case where a dependency from NuGet or some other third party was no longer existing, and there was no clear upgrade path basically from one to the other? And how do you deal with those?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were cases like that. I am trying to like push people in the book to not be scared of the fork button in GitHub. So, for example, in one of our projects, we were using ASP.NET Identity on the .NET Framework. And there is ASP.NET Core Identity, but it's different. It was basically rewritten, and it's not compatible. But we didn't want to migrate from Entity Framework 6 to EF Core. because there were like thousands of queries, and we would have to test each of one if it behaves the same way, because short answer, it doesn't. And so basically we just forked the ASP.NET identity and upgraded one project to work with ASP.NET Core, but to allow using Entity Framework 6, because EF6 still works with the new .NET. It's compiled to .NET Standard, so you can use it. But this binding to ASP.NET on .NET Framework didn't work. It's not .NET Standard. It cannot be. So we just like change this and make our own version of this library. Officially, we submitted a pull request, but I don't expect it will ever be merged, because it's not a supported scenario, and like even to do a security audit to that would be quite complicated. So I don't expect it to be merged, but anyone can grab it and use it in their projects if they are able to accept the risk, of course.
You know, a flip side to this question, to Martin's question, is like, Martin asked, are there dependencies that just don't migrate? But when you're upgrading, are there a lot of dependencies that you find can just be kind of shed or removed completely? Because, you know, in the old .NET, maybe there wasn't a lot of built-in functionality, but in the new .NET, there is a lot of built-in functionality. Do you find a lot of teams end up shedding a lot of dependencies as they upgrade?
One common thing is a dependency injection and logging also, because all .NET didn't have any common library for logging, and there was a lot of popular dependency injection containers, and you have this built in the platform with the new .NET. You can still use these containers. We still have applications which are using Castle Windsor, and they're running on the new .NET, but eventually you want to remove that, because it's just an additional burden that is not bringing the value it was bringing at the times of .NET Framework. So these are dependencies. You don't have to get rid of them immediately. That's great, because at least it doesn't complicate the migration. You can migrate the rest and keep this without changes, but eventually you will want to probably remove it to use what is built in the platform itself.
Okay, and so I'm gonna steal Martin's question that we were passing around this morning. So, I mean, you come in, you talk to the business, you talk to the technical teams, you review the code. Has there ever been a time when you just said, we need to throw everything out, keep business rules, and just rewrite everything from scratch? And I know that's drastic, but what would cause that drastic of a upgrade?
I think I never met a case where like throwing everything away and rewriting it from scratch would be cheaper. But on the other hand, I have met projects where replacing the old custom solution with some ready-made service and adding some integrations was the way. So in all cases, you don't necessarily need to rewrite the original solution. Sometimes you can replace it by something else, and you should, and that's also what I'm writing about in the book. At the beginning, you should do an evaluation, if you will, what parts of the code you actually need to touch, and if there is something that can be removed, just remove it or replace it, because probably it will be cheaper. Also, the very difficult question to answer is how much effort you will need to do the modernization. And what worked for us was just to try, like I'm describing a simple method where you can split for example, the web pages into 3 buckets, small, medium, large, and then migrate few of each bucket, and based on that extrapolate the total effort to to at least get some grasp, some idea of the total effort required for the migration. And this is a number you can then compare with the other alternatives, like to buy some other solution and do some API magic that will connect these systems together.
I guess your clients would never bring a spaghetti code, poorly architected application.
Of course,
to you.
It never happens.
Never.
But never.
We've never seen those applications where you get in there, you get hired, or you get asked to help, and you just kind of go, yeah, this is a Frankenstein project, so we may just want to like redo the whole thing. But I get it. Starting from scratch is expensive and time consuming in its own way. So I don't recommend that out there to the public, but I was just curious if Tomas had ever kind of seen anything like that.
Like just to clarify, like there were a lot of projects where I would be 100% for this option, like to throw it away and rewrite it properly in a cleaner architecture, clean code base and things like that. Much more maintainable code. But
that's not what
that's my personal personal opinion. But if I look at from the stakeholders' perspective, if I compare the costs, it was never the best option.
I know.
And also, even if the code base of the old project is not easy to work with, let's say it politely, then still it usually contains a lot of know-how that has been somehow like implemented there, and this is the most valuable asset of and you would be losing that. So you would spend a lot of time just like trying to understand what is hidden in the code. So that's what you would have to do from scratch if you rewrite the application.
Sure, you're politically more correct than I am. So I you don't call another person's baby ugly, but I guess sometimes I have. So you know that expression. I don't know if you know that American expression, Tomas, calling someone else's baby ugly, but
I never heard it, but it's a nice expression.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Khalid. Go ahead.
Well, since we're on this topic, I'm curious, like all your time consulting, have you ever had conversations? Not that they ended up going this direction, but have you ever had conversations with a client where it's like, well, since we're going to be in the process of migrating and potentially upgrading and potentially rewriting, maybe we don't want to stick with .NET. Maybe we want to look at some of the other tech stacks out there. Has that conversation ever happened? And how do those if they have, how those conversations go?
I have seen several cases where the front end of the web applications was written in React or some like JavaScript based technology, and then it makes sense to if the company, for example, has a team of JavaScript developers, it might make sense to rewrite the front end to Node.js. But I think these decisions, like what language, what technology we use, is usually tightly coupled with what skill set their internal teams have. Because most of the companies we work with, they have their own developers who take care of the old version of the application. So these are people with .NET background. So they, most of the time, they don't say, oh, let's rewrite it to Java. Yeah, because like they don't have people working with Java, they have .NET people. On the other hand, in case of where significant portion is already in JavaScript, then it might make sense to rewrite the front end to Node.js, because then you can share a lot of code between the client and the server, which can be a huge benefit.
Oh, okay. That's really interesting. Sorry, go ahead, Martin. I interrupted you.
Yeah, I was going to ask on... Chris, you're muted, by the way. But I was going to ask, looking at that saying of ugly babies and beautiful babies, if over all those years or all that time that you've been migrating .NET Framework to .NET Core, if there's any beautiful babies that you rediscovered there. I can imagine being in .NET Core for a while and then going back to .NET Framework. Has there been anything where you were like, oh, this was actually nice in full .NET Framework?
Let me think about that for a while.
Oh, we got him on a question, huh?
It's okay to say no.
Maybe no. I will not say no. I'm thinking maybe people will want to kill me, but I think WCF had.
All right, off the show. Get out of here.
Okay, we're done. Goodbye.
I didn't like the implementation, but I really like the idea. And to be honest, when I'm working with APIs now, with like Open API and things like that, a lot of things that were already solved at times of WCF, like generating the client proxies and handling weird .NET specific types or like generics or decimal, and these things just worked in WCF, and you have a hard time when you try to make it work in ASP.NET Core, REST APIs, Open APIs, and these things. On the other hand, like the configuration hell of WCF, I'm not saying nice things about that in the book. So like the idea was quite ahead of time, I guess. But of course, like it wasn't very easy to use the technology on the real world projects.
I agree. I agree with you. I agree with you, Tomas.
I think we need to wash Tomas's mouth out with soap. So, get the pun. So
I always had a weird options. Like I also like WPF because I think that the layout system in WPF hasn't been conquered since yet.
Yeah.
But also like probably if I would be choosing in which technology I would write the application today, I would for sure not pick WCF, and I will not pick WPF.
So what was dependencies? What was the weirdest dependency that you found? Like some strange thing that you were like, wow, I never would have expected that inside of a framework app.
.NET remoting, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
yep. Oh no, that's like a spy dependency. You just got backdoored or something happened.
Yeah, and binary serialization included. That was an actual case in one project. They were storing binary serialized objects in a database, and binary serializer was removed from .NET. So like you will not even. I think today in the latest version the API is not at all, so it will not even compile. And I had to find some like open source library that was able to parse this binary payload, and because we knew the like type definitions, what members were in these classes, we had written the parser for the exact types that appeared in that. So like it wasn't that bad, but we had to deal with that. So it was crazy.
I'm sure. Anytime you serialize binary, it gets a little crazy. So cool.
Yeah.
Well, I think unless we have one last wrap up question, we're gonna let Tomas get back to work, running his company and migrating projects and stuff like that. But Tomas, do you have any parting remarks or things you want to let people know about?
Just like one thing, if you are planning to do modernization of some old legacy application, it's a challenging task. It's never easy. Every project is different, so don't be disappointed or don't be scared that it might go wrong. It's normal. I haven't seen a migration project that would be easy. So if it's harder than expected, it's probably going just fine. So cool. Like that's what I think it's important. So
Yeah.
do not get demotivated by the
Yeah.
fact it's not easy. It's not like some wizard and next finish and you are done, because it works only on conference demos, but not in the real world.
Well, and get your book, right? Before
Yeah.
you start any project or start a big push, get your book and read it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
There is.
Okay.
I try to
never say that. I was trying to get that out to say just buy the book before you start. So.
Okay.
All right, folks.
Cool. Okay. Any parting remarks, Khalid and Martin?
No, Tomas, this is a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. And obviously you've seen things and seen people to the good side of migration. So that's pretty cool. So thank you for your time. We really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, this was awesome.
Absolutely. So, yes. Yep.
And we'll Tomas, we'll see you in the future. We'll have you back on. We enjoy having you. And for all the people out there, like, subscribe, tell your friends, all that stuff that you hear all over YouTube videos over and over again. But it does help us if you subscribe. So with that, we will be back in 2 weeks with probably just the three of us talking. But if you do have guests or someone would like to come on the show and talk about something interesting like Tomas did with migrating code, please just find one of the three of us and pitch your idea, and we'll try to get you on in the future. Right. And with that, we will say adieu. How do you say goodbye in Czech, Tomas?
There's a couple of options. Nashledanou is the most official.
Okay, Nashledanou, everybody.
Nashledanou.
Okay, Nashledanou. Okay. Thanks for having me.